It looks like it's 2 p.m., so I think we'll go ahead and begin. First, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. This is our Beyond Financial Aid Self-Assessment Guidance from the Lumina Foundation webinar for the Georgia institutions that are part of the USG. My name is Robert Todd. I'm the Director of Policy and Partnership Development here at USG. And I will guide us a bit as we begin our conversation here, and then I will turn things over to the capable hands of our friends at the Lumina Foundation, who will be guiding us through the Beyond Financial Aid Self-Assessment Toolkit. To put this in just a little context for everybody, the Complete College Georgia regional meetings that we held through the spring discussed this initiative. We are working at the USG with the Lumina Foundation's Beyond Financial Aid initiative this year and ongoing, because we have seen the power of Beyond Financial Aid to meet needs of institutions, and we want to get that information to all of you so that you can use it. The Beyond Financial Aid Toolkit is designed to help post-secondary institutions close attainment gaps for low-income students by expanding the concept of financial support provided by colleges and universities beyond grants, scholarships, and loans. Beyond Financial Aid describes 6 strategies for institutions to help low-income students overcome the significant challenges created by limited financial resources, something I think we can all relate to. It features institutional self-assessment, that's what we'll be looking at particularly today, that helps cross-functional teams of campus leaders analyze their campus's capacities to serve low-income students. And it also contains resources that help institutions map their steps towards strengthening or expanding their service capacity based on the results of their self-assessment. So the gist of this is a toolkit that is designed for you, to be used by you, to help you in your work with students. And I say low-income students there, but really it will probably be of great help to all students. So for the USG, we're going to work with the Lumina Foundation on BFA. We began last November of last year and continuing on. Thank you to those schools that have already participated in the self-assessment and have done so in tandem with us. We want to take this opportunity to help you refine the plans you've already created or the results that you found from the toolkit. And for those who have not yet completed the toolkit, we're going to give you the information you need today to get started on doing it. And to go ahead and to presage where this is going after, and I'll speak about this at the end of the presentation, our Complete College Georgia Symposium will be October 3rd through 4th. You'll get an invitation coming in the mail next week. And the symposium will be 2 days focusing on how we will attain better completion goals and more efficient completion goals with BFA as a tool, a primary tool to help us do that. We'll say more about that later. In the meantime, I would like to point out that we are now going to have guidance from, this is the meat of the presentation, from the Lumina Foundation. We're very glad to have Nicole McDonald and Priya Chaplot here today from the Lumina Foundation to help us. Nicole McDonald works as a strategy officer at the Lumina Foundation and is responsible for developing strategic approaches to increase student success, and specifically focused on the areas of institutional innovation, leadership development, low-income student support, and degree reclamation, and high-quality learning experiences. Previously, she served as the System Director for Transfer and Retention with the Kentucky Community and Technical College System, and as an associate in academic affairs at the Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education. And Priya Chaplot is the lead author of the Beyond Financial Aid Guidebook. So we have the author with us today. It's a great privilege. She is a consultant in higher education with a focus on community colleges, working on projects related to students' financial stability and guided pathways to support student completion and success. Prior to this, she worked as a senior researcher with the Research and Planning Group for California Community Colleges and as an institutional researcher at Mount St. Antonio College in California. So with that said, I would like to turn this over to Priya Chaplod and put our questions and our information needs in your good hands. And for all of those who will need to ask questions during the presentation, please feel free to write them in the chat box, and we will take questions globally after Priya has completed her presentation. So, Priya.
Thank you so much, Robert. And Jonathan, it's such a pleasure for both Nicole and I to be here today. Thank you for inviting us to speak with all the faces who we cannot make contact with, but we really feel like we're all in the same boat together. I wanted to also stress that what we're going to be talking about today is an abbreviated set of information around the toolkit that Robert shared. And so any of the resources, any of the examples that we share, any of the high points that we make are actually all included in our full Beyond Financial Aid Toolkit, which is available for download very easily on the Lumina Foundation website. And a little later, I'll show you how to access the resources as well. So before I actually dive into Beyond Financial Aid, I'd love to invite Nicole to share just kind of a high-level introduction of where Lumina sits in this work and where Lumina sees this work fitting in with its broader goal. And then from there, Nicole, I can jump in and move towards discussing Beyond Financial Aid.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Priya, and thank you, Rob, and thank you to the folks at the University System of Georgia office, and also to all of you who have gathered to join this webinar across the state. We're really excited about this work at Lumina, and we think, as Rob mentioned, it'll provide a great opportunity to support your work with Complete College Georgia. Specifically, I want to make sure that I say a little bit about Lumina Foundation and then about how we are leveraging a goal that we think connects very centrally to the work that you're doing there in Georgia, and also how we think Beyond Financial Aid will help. Specifically, Lumina Foundation is the nation's largest private philanthropy that's solely dedicated to the post-secondary attainment of Americans. All we do is fund post-secondary education, and we are so excited then to be committed to and investing in this resource that could support who we think are such a significant proportion of today's students. Specifically, Lumina is working to leverage a national agenda to create a stronger nation by increasing the proportion of Americans with some form of high-quality post-secondary degree or credential to 60% by 2025. And as we look at how we are going to move forward with getting to that 60%, we know the significant proportion of students and their success has implications for their income status, and particularly low-income students. Specifically, the central focus of our work is the commitment to reaching Goal 2025, and we feel like this is critical in terms of reaching this level of attainment because in the U.S., we know that some measure of post-secondary education is a requirement in the coming decades for being able to achieve middle-income jobs and full participation in what we are aiming for in terms of a knowledge economy in the country. Within this decade, roughly 2/3 of all jobs will require some form of college-level learning, and right now only 40% of Americans hold an associate's degree or higher. Maybe another 5% hold a post-secondary certificate of economic value, but even at 45%, there's a big talent gap between where we are presently and where we need to be. And so in that regard, we are very idealistic, optimistic, and enthusiastic to really leverage opportunities and resources that will help post-secondary institutions in particular be able to increase the number and proportion of students who have success at their colleges, and the overwhelming majority of today's students are low-income students, first-generation students, students of color, and adult students, all populations who can be served by the work that we're trying to leverage through BFA. We will gladly concede that the proportion of Americans who have attained some post-secondary credential has increased very incrementally over the past several years, but we really still have a long way to go to get to 60%. And we see Beyond Financial Aid as a resource that can be helpful to your institutions in helping the students who are actually showing up on your campuses. And so we're delighted to talk with you about Beyond Financial Aid. Any questions you have of Priya or of me as we move through this, we ask that you identify in the chat bar, and we are excited to share news and information about this tool with you.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. So let's dive in. Part of our agenda is to frame the conversation around the relationship between financial stability and students' short-term and long-term academic outcomes. We're going to dive deep into the actual toolkit Beyond Financial Aid, where I will provide an overview of the framework of 6 strategies that Nicole just referenced, and also talk with you about how to translate those strategies that are so broad into actual institutional mindset. And so we have a self-assessment that you and your institutions can use to see where you fit in this work. And then lastly, we'll share a little bit of information about resources that are available for you on our website that can help continue this conversation on your campuses and in your system. So very briefly, I wanted to just go over the 3 guiding principles that have really driven this work. We've been working on Beyond Financial Aid for almost 3 years now, and it has been such an incredible journey about what is possible. And so the guiding principles that have really driven this work is we really believe that there are a large number of students that are out there that are challenged by limited resources. We can use Pell Grants as a proxy. At least 1 in 3 American undergrads receive a Pell Grant, and we know that there is an impact of not having enough resources and the impact on students' ability to connect with, enter, and complete educational programs. And the second guiding principle is we really believe that when institutions structure the support in a coherent, intentional, comprehensive way, and this kind of support we're talking about is non-traditional, so I'll talk a little bit about what we mean when we say beyond financial aid. We really believe, and we've also seen that this can support students in completing their courses, moving on to the next term, and also have some other types of benefits, not only for students, but also for institutions and for our society. And last and most importantly, this work is already being done by many colleges around the country. So this is not some pipe dream of what we think we can achieve in the future. This is already happening, and part of what Beyond Financial Aid is trying to do is bring up those stories of your peer institutions around the country that are doing some kind of work and having some traction in this. You can see what might be possible in the ways that you support your own students. And so when we say Beyond Financial Aid is this mama-sized toolkit. It has 4 parts. It is, so the first 2 parts you'll see are a primer on strengthening support for low-income students, and I'll talk a little bit more about low-income students in just a minute. But the first part is, think of it as like a part lit review and part framework and model building. And so what we do is we make the case for why institutions should support students in broader ways than traditional types of financial aid, and what benefits exist for students, institutions, and society. And then we also provide a framework of 6 strategies with college examples that show what is possible. That's the primer. The second part, and I believe that to be the jewel of our work, is really a translation of that primer and that kind of lit review and broad framework into an actual institutional self-assessment. So you, with your colleagues on your campus, can get together and translate those 6 strategies and see where your college is along each of those 6 strategies, and just use the self-assessment as a way to identify where there might be existing efforts that can be strengthened, or where there might be new efforts that make sense given the student populations that you are serving. And so the self-assessment is really meant to be a companion to your exploration work, just a way to be able to organize what is already happening, a way to organize and prioritize what could happen. And then we also have an interpretation guide. So just like any good Cosmopolitan or 17 magazine self-assessment, it'll say, if you answered mostly A's in strategy 1, this means blah, blah, blah for your college to consider as you move forward. And so we really want the interpretation guide to help bridge what the self-assessment results show to how this can drive conversation and engagement on your campus as well. One other quick note to mention, our Beyond Financial Aid Guide was officially released last June, and it was officially completed a few months before then. So in short, it is a little dated. I think a lot of the principles and a lot of the examples still stand, but we are very excited this summer to actually work on a revision of this guide. We will hopefully have this launched in fall, so stay tuned for almost like a polishing and an addition of college examples and some research that will bring this to date as well. So, and as Robert mentioned, while Beyond Financial Aid focuses on low-income students, I really want to stress here, and Nicole mentioned this as well, this is really about how to serve broad populations of your students. These students can be low-income students, these can be first-generation students, these can be veterans, foster youth, in some cases undocumented immigrants. Basically what we're talking about in Beyond Financial Aid is how can you alleviate the types of financial challenges that students have when they have unmet financial needs, meaning what the cost of going to college is and how much they are receiving to support that. So what is left over and how to be able to help mitigate that amount. And so when we first talk about who are low-income students, it may help to figure out how widespread is this. And we can use different types of proxies. One easy proxy is Pell recipiency. And so looking at the College Board's trends in higher education, this diagram shows a 10-year longitudinal look at how many undergraduates are in America and what percent of those students receive Pell. And generally, this has been in the 30–35% rate, meaning at least 1 in 3 students across the country, to and for your institutions, receives Pell. And one very important note here is that this is undercounting, because this assumes that only those who let me say it another way, not all who qualify for the Pell actually apply for the Pell. And so there may, and there probably are, many more students out there that could have been considered a low-income student or could have had unmet financial needs that wasn't captured by this process. Another quick note is that different states have different types of federal aid or different types of financial aid that may not go through the FAFSA in this traditional way, California being one of those. And so common characteristics, we kind of already went over this. Common characteristics of students who have unmet financial needs, these include low-income students, these include first-generation students who are new to the process of going to college and navigating the variety of structures that we have in place. In many cases, students they come from families that have cultural stigma around receiving handouts and receiving support in these broader ways. And so I think what we're talking about here is how do we help students who we know have outstanding financial needs beyond what is available through traditional forms of financial aid, such as grants, loans, and scholarships. And the last piece I want to mention here, and again, all of these are explained in greater detail in the toolkit itself, but this was a really critical diagram for us. In this diagram, there was a study done that was looking at graduation rates, college graduation rates, based on family income and test scores. Now, we know that test scores are only one proxy measurement of performance, but using this, there was a very fascinating finding. And here, if you look at the 2 bubbles that are connected by the arrow, so the top left bubble and the bottom right bubble, it says that students who scored above average on the test and who were in the highest income bracket completed college at a rate of 30%, whereas students who had above average test scores but were in the lowest income bracket completed at a rate of 26%. And what this diagram shows, I'm jumping right to the punchline here, is that high-performing low-income students are less likely to graduate than low-performing high-income students. Think about that for a minute. Even if you do better, if you are in a lower income bracket, there is a smaller chance that you'll be able to complete college. And I think what the diagram is trying to convey are 2 things. Number one, that resources make a difference, that there are many students who could benefit from different types of supports that could help them address some of the life issues that would enable them to focus on their academics and move forward. And the other piece is that perhaps it challenges our notion of education as a meritocracy, and that only those that work hard are able to succeed, but that there might be other structural issues that we need to investigate and explore to strengthen the opportunities for all students. And so in the guidebook, as I mentioned, we go over the different types of benefits of this work to students. Here I've pulled out some of the benefits for institutions. Supporting students in this broader financial way can actually have benefits for short-term institutional performance, such as retention, persistence, term-to-term enrollment, and also in long-term rates such as completion, transfer, employment rates. And then can also help the institutions address calls for accountability from external agencies. It can also be a source of revenue from additional tuition and additional state apportionment as students stay in their programs longer. And as I mentioned earlier, this is one way that we can work towards greater equity of student outcomes and narrowing the achievement gap, and then also strengthen our relationships with our community, because as we'll share, the community can play and already works with many of our students, and there is a very natural fit there. So let's go ahead and jump into the 6 strategies for expanding the support. And here are the 6 strategies at a glance, and I'll walk through each of those, providing a quick example for each so you can get a sense of what the strategies are like. They're not in any particular order except for strategy number 1. Strategy number 1, which we'll talk about first, is the important one that lays the foundation for your particular institution. And then it's up to you and your colleagues at your institution to figure out how to prioritize the rest of the strategies according to the priorities that your institution already has. And so we can jump right in. And what I will also do is when I go through each of the strategies, I'll give you an example of what the self-assessment items on our self-assessment look like, so you can see how this is all tied together. So the first strategy is to know the low-income students at your institution. So while we can talk at great length about what's happening in the entire country, or even in the entire university system of Georgia, the truth is that every single institution is unique. You're unique in the types of students you serve, you're unique in the types of resources you have available, or the policies you have in place, or the culture that you have developed over the years at your institution. And so what strategy 1 is really advocating is how can you, as your institution, find out what the reality of your students is at your institution? And so strategy 1 talks about gathering the different types of data that can help answer some of this mystery, right? And so we really focus on both quantitative data and qualitative data. We focus on what's available at the institution and some unique places where some data sources might lie. And what I'm actually going to do is pause on this because I'm going to come back to this towards the end of our presentation when we can have a longer conversation about the data piece. But in this strategy, what we're really trying to do is understand the experience of your students that have unmet financial need at your institution. And a couple of very quick examples of how colleges have done this. Georgia State University, one of your peer organizations, actually used some of its institutional data. They looked at course taking patterns of their students, identified which students were entering their senior year but had an outstanding amount on their account that would prohibit them from registering for their final year or final semester of classes. And they were able to use that data to inform how they were going to distribute the Panther retention grants, these grants that basically absorbed that outstanding amount to enable students to register. They also had some high success in the students who did receive the grants and who were able to complete within 2 semesters. But I think the important part of the story here was how was institutional data leveraged to be able to inform changes in practice. Another quick example is LaGuardia Community College in Queens, New York. They have a system where when a student completes the FAFSA, there are certain items on the FAFSA that are flagged. And if a student responds yes or no, it informs the financial aid advisor on how to work with that student. So for example, I'm going to quickly toggle over here. So here is the FAFSA. This is the newest, latest, and greatest FAFSA. And in this FAFSA, for example, there are some items that actually ask, for example, if number 76, if a student is receiving supplemental nutrition assistance program, which is the modern understanding of food stamps. And so there are, for example, even in the FAFSA, certain questions that students respond to that can inform the institution of what types of services, such as food security or housing security, they might either be receiving through public benefits, or they may need, as they go through the institution. And so what LaGuardia did was actually connect. So using the FAFSA, they were able to, when they met with a student, say, hey, I noticed that you answered such and such on the question. Let's talk a little bit about what services you may need, and then work from there. And so again, the self-assessment instrument has 15 items for strategy 1, and I'm going to show you here what that looks like. So here is our self-assessment. And so for strategy 1, know the low-income students at your institution. We have a total of 15 items. And so what we would anticipate is that you and your colleagues from different areas of the institution would come together, and you would go ahead and complete these 15 questions. And you can rate yourself A, B, or C. Our institution does this a lot. Our institution kind of does it, and our institution doesn't do it. And that is, that's a way that you can see where you do have some information and where you might be interested in prioritizing gathering some information as well. Okay, so moving on to strategy 2, and Robert, Jonathan, Nicole, let me know if there are any questions. I can't see it on my screen, but I'm happy to answer them if they come up. Strategy 2 is probably the heart of Beyond Financial Aid, because strategy 2 is really talking about providing supports to help low-income students overcome practical barriers. So this is what we talk about when we talk about Beyond Financial Aid. What are the life challenges that students face as they're going to school? And in other words, sometimes, why do our students drop out? In many cases, students have to work, and so many of our students either go to school part-time or full-time, but they're also working part-time or full-time to be able to balance all the family and life needs that they have. And so strategy 2 is, how can institutions provide these broader life supports that students need as they come to school? And the good news is many colleges in different ways already do this. You on your campus may already have either on-campus support programs, off-campus referrals. And so the idea behind strategy 2 is, number 1, figure out what your greatest needs of your students are and see if you already have existing supports to provide those. And then the other big part here is the second bullet point, which is really about, even if there are many different types of services on campus, what can help students access and use them in a maximum way? And so the idea of bundling, integrating, centralizing these services is really key. How is it possible that a student who comes in for one service can actually find out that they might be eligible for another service that might alleviate something they didn't even think about? So the idea of bundling them together, that if a student applies for one, they're also informed of another. Or creating a space that students are already using, how can multiple services be available for students then? And examples of these are programs like SparkPoint in California, Benefits Access for College Completion, which was a Lumina-funded grant a few years ago that actually just came out with a report last week about the lessons they learned, where 7 colleges around the country worked on integrating public benefit screenings and other types of support into their college processes. And then also Arkansas's Career Pathways Initiative, where students who qualify for this, and this is available at every single community college across the state of Arkansas, funded by TANF dollars. And in this case, for the students, usually student parents who qualify, they get a variety of support, from academic support to help them select the right program and make progress in their program and monitor that progress, to a career coach that helps them translate their academics into employment, to also a kind of other types of counseling support, including financial support. So helping them with their books, helping them with their transportation, helping them with any kind of unforeseen emergency that might come up that can jeopardize their ability to continue in either the course, that term, or even in the program. So for strategy 2, we have 20 total items on the self-assessment, and so these are things like, my institution works with local public transit authorities to ensure that low-income students have public transit access to the institution. And so for each of these items, again, you and your colleagues can self-assess and see whether you do this. What's really cool about this when you do it together as a team is sometimes one person at the campus might think that that service is not available, and somebody else on the campus says, no, 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 we have it, but it's just over here. So part of what Beyond Financial Aid is also trying to do is organize what is available and think about ways that we can inform each other as faculty, staff, administrators about the types of services that are already existing before we go out to create new ones. Strategy 3 says, oh, for all of these services we just talked about in Strategy 2, food insecurity, housing instability, transportation, healthcare, childcare. Strategy 3 is saying, maybe we don't need to recreate these on our own as institutions. And sometimes there might be experts in our community that are already doing this and already serve students that happen to be our students. So where are there opportunities for us to leverage our partnerships for the types of service delivery? Now, you may think that you have certain partnerships that are already existing. So part of what Strategy 3 is talking about is, are there ways to deepen those existing partnerships? Are there ways to maybe invite those partners to come on campus with the services instead of necessarily sending a student off campus and crossing your fingers and hoping that they get what they need? And so that's a big part of Strategy 3. And we recognize that building and maintaining partnerships is a long-term effort. And I think what Strategy 3 is really trying to get at is you don't have to do it alone. There are many other partners, and these are just some examples here, community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, government agencies that are interested in sharing the support for students because this is also core to their mission. And so partnerships can really be a way to alleviate some of the effort that your institution might have to create a new financial counseling or financial literacy workshop, for example. A couple of quick examples here. Central New Mexico Community College, they actually connected with their VITA centers, which are these voluntary income tax assistance centers, and they had their accounting students learn how to prepare taxes. And they got college credit for it, and then they took that experience and went out in the community, and for any New Mexican that needed, they would provide and prepare taxes for them. So this was a very mutually beneficial partnership. Another one was at Skyline College in California that actually brought in their government agency on campus to help students apply for SNAP. In California, it's called CalFresh because everything starts with Cal. And they said that it was called CalFresh in a day, but this could be done in 2 hours from helping students identify if they are eligible all the way to approving them for the benefits. So what are ways that we can think about bringing our services directly to the students as much as possible? Strategy 4, again, in the same vein of Strategy 3 of, hey, maybe we don't do it all new, all by ourselves. Strategy 4 is saying, what can we do to empower our students to use resources that already exist? So you may think of a great service that's available on your campus that is underused, or one that maybe many faculty members or other staff members don't know about. So where are there opportunities to raise the profile of those instead of creating new ones immediately? And the truth is, many of the students who need some of these services may not be the ones that either I know that the services are out there, know that they can qualify for the services. And so part of Strategy 4 is how can we either meet students where they are or make this the normal part of going to college. So where are there services that would be considered to convert into an opt-out process instead of an opt-in process, meaning I don't have to raise my hand to get into a particular opportunity. I have to raise my hand to get out of the opportunity. And an example of that, again, going back to LaGuardia Community College that had used FAFSA data as part of the public screenings process. So when a student would come in for this integrated public benefit screening, this was done for every single student to see not only what kind of traditional forms of financial aid you're eligible for, but also what public benefits you may be eligible for. And this was done to every single student, and the student would have to say, I know you said that I may be eligible, or you said I could consider this, but it's up to me and I don't need it. But what they did was they really tried to normalize the process of accessing some of these benefits. And this is one way that you can start kind of mitigating that stigma that might be associated with some of these processes as well. Again, for Strategy 4, we have 14 items. This can be things like students at my institution participate in a benefit screening process, not just students who arrive at the institution knowing that they need financial assistance, but really for all students. Or students at my institution understand the full cost of attending the institution, both inside, both tuition and fees and also other types of expenses, and figuring out the best ways to pay for that. Strategy 5. Strategy 5 is another one of those very introspective strategies that says, maybe we need to think about our internal processes and the types of impacts our processes and policies have on our students. And so once upon a time, a policy made sense, it was convenient, it was logical, but now that it continues to be there, it might actually be having these unintended consequences on our students. So one very quick example of this was at a college that had, they had online registration, which I am assuming all of your colleges have. And so at their college, online registration started as soon as the clock struck midnight, which was great for students who were able to have access to a computer and have access to the internet. But for students who did not have that type of resource, they had to wait a full 8 or 8.5 hours until the office opened up at the college the next morning to be able to register for their classes, thereby putting them at a disadvantage. And we know how quickly high-impact classes go, and so the impact of not having access to register for these classes was really large for certain groups of students. And so for this digital divide, and this was at Skyline College in California, they recognized that this was an issue, and they changed it so that registration in every single form took place and started at the same time. One great example of a way to organize your introspective reflection process, Skyline actually created something called the diversity, equity, or the comprehensive diversity framework, which they consider as like an equity audit that you can do on your own campus. So you basically map out the different types of interaction that your students have with your institution. Everything from learning about your university, learning about how to applying, starting, and then what they map out is what happens in that interaction. And it helps them, and this is available online. You can go and take a look at what they've done. You can also adapt it for your own efforts. But it was a way to be able to understand the quiet or hidden impacts of some of the processes that may be convenient to us, but may not translate the same convenience over to our students. So again, we have a few items for this one. My institution has a flow chart that indicates the steps that students need to take to enter and navigate the processes around financial stability resources. So thinking about the student experience in this and thinking about how we lay our processes and policies and programs and services on top of that. And then lastly, strategy number 6 is really talking about the fact that this world of financial stability, thinking about ways that we can bolster the type of support our students have outside the classroom. This can't exist in a bubble, nor should it exist in an office like financial aid. That's where the Beyond Financial Aid comes in. This is really meant to be a collaborative, institution-wide effort. And what strategy 6 is really advocating for is that what ways exist to incorporate this into other types of effective practices that we know strengthens the ability of students to progress across the institution. And I think Robert mentioned that earlier too, that this is not just for low-income students, this can be for all students. And what strategy 6 really wants to pinpoint is these effective strategies that are taking hold at many institutions around the country, whether it's guided pathways or intrusive advising or helping students monitor their own progress or helping them transition to employment. These are effective practices that can help any student. But the truth is these are the types of services and practices that are extremely important specifically for low-income students, first-generation students, foster youth, students with unmet financial need. And so strategy 6 is really saying where are there opportunities to incorporate this and weave this into other institutional efforts instead of having it be the separate thing that happens elsewhere. And so strategy 6's items, we have about 18 items, and we just identify some of the other areas where it may make sense. So an example for this could be there are colleges that have mandatory student success courses that students have to take in their first term, or even if they have a mandatory student orientation. And they're looking at ways that they can weave the financial literacy component into that. And so there are either partnerships with the community that some colleges have where community members will come in and actually teach those modules, or there are other types of products that have been created that can help weave financial literacy, financial coaching into the traditional student success or first-year experience course that students have to take. So where are there opportunities to weave some of the financial stability work into places that students already are going to be? So I'm going to stop here and ask if we have any questions.
And this is Robert once again. If you have any questions to make things easier for all of us, please place them in the chat box so we don't have to try to work with audio for all of the folks that are signed in. While we're waiting for some questions in the chat box, I also want to say if you're one of the schools who's already worked through the BFA self-assessment and you'd like to make a comment of some of the results that you found in the self-assessment, you can also place those in the chat box as well as the questions.
Absolutely. Happy to help. And while you're all thinking about the questions, I think I've already kind of covered this, but just to go over what is possible. So the way that we've designed BFA is that the primer, the first two parts, are meant to give you the foundation. And parts 3 and 4, the self-assessment and the interpretation guide, are the actual preliminary action. And so the idea is that you figure out who your core team is. Who needs to be at the table for this kind of conversation? This might already be part of an existing committee that it makes a lot of sense to just link this work over, whether it's a student success committee or an institutional effectiveness committee or an equity committee. But the idea is to make sure that you have a cross-functional representation at the table, because there's so many people who work with students in unique ways that could really contribute to this, this shared conversation. And the idea is to take the self-assessment together. If you can do it all together in one room in a matter of a couple of hours, or you can all go off, do it separately, and come back. However you decide to do it, we ask that you do it together, that you do the discussion of the results as a team.
Something you just said there, Priya, that I'd like to emphasize, that this tool is something that's meant to be of benefit to each of the institutions. This is not some kind of new piece that we want to push on for institutions to do just to do it. And when Priya said 2 hours, yes, that's the truth of it. It is not a very long process, and for some of those 6 strategies, you'll notice there were many items, but not all those items are going to apply to you. And that's what, so far, the folks in Georgia have found. So understand that this is far more manageable than it might seem when you think of the number of items that we've just discussed.
And Robert, this is Nicole. One of the things that I'd like, piggybacking off of what you just said, is to say also that BFA is intended to be an appreciative assessment. So it's also not a gotcha. There's nothing about a Cosmo or 17 magazine assessment that's really a gotcha. And so I know that there's sometimes we take assessments, sometimes data gets used in interesting ways, but BFA is really intended to be very appreciative, highlighting what it is you're already doing, what it is you have the opportunity to build on, and where it is you have the opportunity to grow. So all of those are appreciative opportunities that we think will be beneficial in accelerating or aggregating work that may very well already be going on at your institution. So I wanted to just underscore that.
And the USG, I promise, sees it in exactly the same way as Lumina. So we're definitely on the same wavelength.
That's awesome. And the other thing to also mention is we are not expecting, and nor have we ever seen, or do we anticipate that any college will be able to answer that they're doing all of the items in each of the strategies. I mean, some of the items in the strategies are just based on research that we came across or based on good practices that we saw other colleges doing. So as Nicole was saying, this is appreciative. It's also just sometimes an idea box of what your college could consider doing if it seems to be in the best interest of your students' experience. So again, it's a companion guide, and it's not a gotcha, and it's not a you're expected to do all of it. It's really just a companion piece to help you navigate and organize what you may already have and identify some opportunities to push that work forward. Okay.
So we're still waiting to see if we get any questions.
No problem. And I did want to, I know we had talked, I had talked very briefly, so as the questions come, the only other piece that I wanted to mention was just an opportunity to talk about some places where some of this information can exist. There have been some questions that we've received about from a variety of colleges about how much is enough data? When do you know you have enough data to move forward and make decisions? And we just wanted to take an opportunity to address a little bit of that today. And instead of saying, how much do you need to get started, I'd really like to reframe this around what is the question that you're trying to answer? And how can that research question that you build as a team identify what types of data can help you start the conversation and move forward? So we can spend the rest of our eternal lives working on making sure that the data that we collect are perfect and comprehensive, but we also are recognizing that this is the real world. So part of this is about bringing your team together, identifying what your focus of your inquiry is, and figuring out what types of data make sense, what types of data can you access. And so here are just some the questions to consider, helping you figure out what kinds of data might be appropriate. So to be able to better understand the experiences of low-income students at your institution, as I mentioned earlier, figure out who needs to be at the table, whose voices, including students, make sense at different phases of this process. Where can you better understand the reality of what students go through? And where do some of these data already exist? And where do some of these data need to be gathered? And again, that's a question that varies from campus to campus. And part of this is also, how do you plan on sharing this information and engaging other people in this process? With that, it's also, where are there existing venues that you can leverage instead of creating new venues and new spaces? What's already happening at the institution where there might be a good space for this conversation to fit in? And I just put together a quick list of some data sources. So working with your institutional research and planning offices on campus can help you understand some of the research that may have already been conducted, looking at your student information systems, to be able to look at demographics and usage of services, what services on your campus are used more than others, what are the rates of progress and completion for different types of students at your institution. And as I mentioned, also the FAFSA. So working with your financial aid office to figure out what types of information can be shared in which ways to help you better understand some of the realities that our students face. And then the same goes with qualitative sources. There may already be surveys and focus groups and interviews that may be conducted that can give you a fuller understanding, the kind of color in the picture of student experiences. So this could be an exit interview that can help you identify why some students leave, or the realities of the students. A couple of really cool things that I've seen. University of Massachusetts has a program called U-Access, and what they decided to do was canvass their campus to see the reality. So they actually engaged students who took this on as their research project and created an entire survey instrument around food and housing instability. That's where they were focused, food and housing instability among their undergraduates. And they went out and they actually conducted the survey, analyzed the results, and actually presented that to the campus so that they could figure out what to do from there. The CSU system in California, the California State University system, just did a statewide across, I think, 28 campuses to understand food and housing insecurity across the entire state. And what's amazing is the chancellor is not only advocating this publicly, but he has also now approved funding for them to complete phase 2, which is starting to engage the voices and perspectives of faculty and staff on campus. So think about ways that engaging the voices of people on your campus has already been done or can be done in reasonable ways. And what I wanted to do here was also ask Jonathan or anybody else who'd like to share maybe what are some, given these as general institutional sources of data, are there others that may be available to colleges in Georgia through either the system or other places that you might want to add colleges to consider?
What do you think, Rasha? One of the things we've had a conversation with is that there is a lot of data that's there's a lot of information that's collected about students. And most of the folks in this call, I know, are associated with some of that data and are aware of it. The system collects a very thin amount of data. We don't collect the sort of things that probably are most useful at the institution level. But I know that if there is a question from a group, and this certainly comes out of the October meeting, that if there is system-wide data that would be beneficial, that we can begin to work on a business plan to make that happen. And I would encourage campuses to sort of create a suite of what they think they need in order to get this done, and to share that among each other, because there are probably data collection processes that are different at each institutional at each institution that would make that a learning opportunity. And again, and we said this, I want to make this very clear, this is not about catching you doing something, but really sort of opportunity to find out who you are and maybe where you can move better to support the students who are being enrolled and are maybe needing more support to move themselves into that graduate category.
And this is Robert. I would like to just add on to that you can certainly share that with us as we do our Complete College Georgia Symposium in October, but also if you find data that you need and you believe that we may be able to help at the USG, you can email me, robert.todd, T-O-D-D, @usg.edu. Also, you can use the email addresses on the Complete College Georgia website or Leslie Ann Fenton's email, which was at the bottom of the invitation for this. All of them will get to us, and we'll pass those on to the folks in research that can make that happen.
Awesome. Thank you so much, you two. And I think we have about 10 minutes left, so if you have any questions, feel free to post them. We're happy to discuss. And in the meantime, I can just give you a quick peek at how to access the resources. The website for this, as I mentioned here, is www.luminafoundation.org/BFA, and that is your headquarters for everything related to BFA. That's where you can download different lengths of the toolkit. So there's a 2-page executive summary, one-sheeter, and then you can also download the full document, the mama-sized document that includes all 4 sections. Recently, we've also created an action planning guide and a facilitator guide. So if you, as the institution, take the self-assessment, get your results, and then think, so what? These are where you can go to. So the action planning guide helps translate your assessment results to the next phase of activity on your campus. And a facilitator guide is if someone takes the role on your campus of facilitating this process, there are some tips and insights on how to help them do that. Here we also have different types of presentations and resources. You can access a whole series of webinars that we've done that have the introduction, that also talk about how to get started, how to build a core team, who should be on the core team, et cetera. So this is a web page, and this is, as we continue refining a lot of our resources, we'll continue adding to this web space as well. And then we also have our email address. If you have any questions, you have any feedback, you want to share your story, we're happy to hear it, so just go ahead and email us. And we also have a hashtag #BeyondFineAid. If you come across something that you would just like to tweet your heart out, we'd love it. And then also here's the contact information for myself and Nicole if you have any specific questions for us. But just like Rob said, there are many different ways that you can email us. You can either email us individually, or you can always use the go-to bfa@luminafoundation.org, and it will route itself magically to us.
Well done, Priya. We had the question earlier, how can I get a hold of a copy of this presentation? We're going to post a copy of this presentation on the Complete College Georgia video archive, and we'll tell about that on our last slide. So it will be there. Also, I'm sure if you, on those Beyond Financial Aid links that you had, you will see very similar slides, very similar information, but we could also, if you need, also get this presentation to you in another format. Just simply contact us and let us know. I want to, as we're beginning to wrap up here, I wanted to go ahead and mention again, we have timed our invitation for the 2016 Complete College Georgia Symposium. We had the regional meetings earlier in the year, which were a big success. And we're going to have the one for the entire state in October. We're going to send that invitation out next week. We wanted to time it with this presentation. But to give you just a quick idea in advance, we're planning on October 3rd through 4th at Middle Georgia State University in Macon to make it as convenient as possible for everyone. And we're going to focus this year, we are not losing track of our CCG goals. Those remain as critical as ever, but we're going to focus on how the Beyond Financial Aid work and toolkits can help maximize students' opportunities for success and help us with those CCG goals. Whether that is new pressures with limited resources for students and institutions, uncovering hidden opportunities for improvement in managing and aligning financial aid, academic, instructional, and institutional resources. We think that the toolkit will help us look at those in a different way. So we'll send that invitation out next week. If you are speaking to others on your institution teams, please feel free to pass on this information. We'll send that invitation out widely. And we hope that those who have not yet begun the Beyond Financial Aid process will now be energized and have that done soon. We are going to ask during the symposium in October that institutions come ready to share some of their insights from those Beyond Financial Aid self-assessments and related work. We're not making these any part, for those who are wondering about this, of the 2016 campus plan update. Next year for 2017, we are going to ask for a summary, though, of your insights from the Beyond Financial Aid toolkit and self-assessment. So if you go ahead and do that now, then it will make things much more powerful for next year as well. Are there any other questions before we wrap up? Any more questions?
I just going to mention something about
yes.
the data. Hi, this is Rachna. I work in the Research and Policy Office at the University of Georgia, so I know some of you that are on the call or in the IR offices. I just wanted to say that in terms of the financial aid data that we have from the institutions, it's mostly based on the FAFSA, and I just wanted to remind you guys that we get it at a year lag. So in terms of being able to provide the updated information, you guys at the campuses will probably have access to that prior to when we do. So just keep that in mind going forward. But yeah, I think the FAFSA information is really the one that's going to provide the most kind of information about unmet need, and that's something that could be, calculated by, thinking about, okay, what is the amount that the student's going to get charged? What's the estimated family contribution? That might be something that could be calculated as an indicator for, low income.
Rachna, thank you. Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And that's very much ties in with your earlier comments, Priya.
Yep.
So if you look on the screen now, you will see the presentation will be archived at completega.org/CCG_videos.
And all that material will actually also be available at completega.org/BFA.
Oh, great.
For the BFA on the page. So you'll see
Awesome.
That is terrific. We love it.
Yeah.
And I also want to add that I made some last-minute changes minutes before our session, so I will forward this most up-to-date PowerPoint presentation over to you all, and you're more than welcome to make it public and share with the world.
Thank you.
Excellent. So it's 2:58. I know it's a Friday, so if there aren't any other questions, I would like to thank our guests, Nicole and Priya, everyone here at the USG who has been a part of making this happen, and especially everyone at our Georgia institutions who has taken time out today to find out how we can work to make things better for students who are low income and first generation.
Robert,
awesome. Thank you so much for having us.
I want to say thank you to you and the system office team who has been actively engaged with us regarding this, and thanks to all of your colleagues at the colleges and universities around the system. Lumina is very enthusiastic about connecting with you in this work, and we're just delighted at the enthusiasm that you've shown regarding it. Thank you. And thank you for your time on a Friday afternoon, a sunny Friday afternoon. So thank you.
Thank you. So for everyone, happy Friday, and please let us know any questions you have.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.